Good morning, everyone. Today in our lesson we will be learning about the impact of climate change on the mountain pine beetle and forest ecosystem. Our learning outcomes as shown here. The first one, we will identify the adverse effects of climate change on the mountain pine beetle. We will discuss the impact of climate change on forest ecosystems. We will investigate the stages of the infestation of the MPB. We will examine the role of the mountain pine beetle in the process described as succession, and we will also list mitigation measures to combat the increase of the infestation of the mountain pine beetle in Belize. Okay, our first activity, I will be distributing these packages to you, and I encourage you to work in pairs, in threes as well. As soon as you get the package, open the envelope and put together the different parts. Try your best to create an image of a particular species. As soon as you create that image and you identify that species, be prepared to share some basic facts about that organism. No, it's right in there. All the parts are in the package. Thank you, Letitia. Try and set the parts together. Excellent. They are finished already. Wonderful job, Yemi. Good job, Kyle. Kyle is saying he finished first. Excellent job here, Daisy and her team members. And Edwin. Now, what were the different pictures that we formed or created? What word can we use to describe all those organisms? Insects. Very good, class. An insect is a very diverse group. There's over 700,000 species of insects that can be found throughout the world. Now, let us hear from Daisy. What do you know about this particular species here? Give us the name of your organism and tell us at least 2 to 3 facts about it.
We have a mosquito, and they can live as long as 5 months.
Yes. Okay, they have a mosquito there.
And the female is the one that sucks blood.
Okay, very good.
They live in large numbers and they reproduce in moving dumps.
In large numbers. Thank you, Daisy. Let us hear from Ainsworth Group. Which insect did you create? They did an ant. Go ahead, Ainsworth. What can you share with us concerning ants?
They can carry up twice the size. They can carry twice the size.
They carry weight twice the size of their body mass. Very good, Ainsworth. Yemi, would you want to share one fact about ants?
They have 3 parts.
Their body is divided into 3 parts. Very good, Ainsworth and Yemi. Let us hear from Kyle's group.
Beetles.
They got the beetle. Go ahead, sir.
Full growth takes a year. They mostly damage pine trees.
Very good, Kyle. Thank you. Let us hear from Yadira.
Our group got a spider. It has 8 legs. It belongs to the arthropod family, and it cannot fly.
What is the thank you, Yadira. What do you think is the difference between an insect and a spider? Most people believe that a spider is an insect, but she mentioned a key term there. Can you kindly repeat the word for us, Yadira?
It is from the arthropod family.
Arthropod family. What can we say is the difference between a mosquito and a spider there? And thanks for trying, release.
The spider does not fly and the mosquito flies.
Okay, but we can say that the insect has 6 legs and the arthropod, the spider there, 8 legs. Very good. Okay, let us move on. Thanks for trying, students. Now, what we have found based on research is this, students, insects can be found in every environment on our planet, especially in warm tropical areas. An insect have 3 main body parts: a head, a thorax, and an abdomen. The insect is generally a small creature. It can be many different colors depending on the species. It has 3 pairs of legs, 2 pairs of wings. Insects are known to have compound eyes And it also has an exoskeleton, meaning that insects are invertebrates. They are cold-blooded creatures. Now, insects play a vital role in the environment. They have a vast number of important functions, such as they aerate the soil. Insects help to create humus, and they create spaces within the soil. They also pollinate blossoms and fruit trees. They control insects and plant pests because some insects feed on other insects as well. They help to decompose dead nutrients, dead animals or dead matter, releasing nutrients into the soil and making the soil content much more rich for plant and crop production. A few insects dig burrows that provide channels for water. They fertilize the soil with nutrients from their droppings as well. They make material which people use, such as silkworm, which produces silk, and bees, which produces honey. How many of you enjoy eating honey? Okay. They serve as food source for birds, fish, amphibians, and small mammals. They also transmit diseases. Insects can be harmful and beneficial. They also help to break down wood, like the termites, and they create damage to crop production as well. Now, all insects grow from eggs. They go through various stages until they reach adulthood. This transformation through these stages is called metamorphosis. Insects undergo either complete or incomplete metamorphosis. An insect also has an antenna that can be used to detect odors or to touch objects. How many of you have ever tried to catch a cockroach in your home? Come on, I have had that experience. When you would see maybe that species in the corner and you want to get it out of your home and you try to catch it, it moves very quickly because the antenna there serves a specific purpose. It can detect smell, odors, and movement of objects as well. An insect breathes through the thoracic and abdominal spiracles. Since the insect has no lungs, remember we were saying that they are considered invertebrates? The spiracles go throughout the insect body to give gases or to release gases. The ability to fly, insect has the ability to fly and to disperse over large areas of land. And they are able to form ecological niches or communities based on the area that they choose to live. Now, what do you know about this organism? Have you seen a picture of this organism before? Okay, who would want to share some information about this organism? You to identify the name of this species. And if you want to share, you raise your hand for me. What is the name of this species? Thank you, Glendy.
A beetle.
It is a beetle. Thank you, Glendy. But what kind of beetle is it? Because we have thousands of beetle species in the world. We are talking about one specific beetle today. Kyle?
The mountain pine beetle.
Thank you very much. The pine beetle, the mountain pine beetle. Now, what else do we know about the mountain pine beetle? What else? There are so many things we can share. Kyle?
They are about the size of a grain of rice.
Okay, so they're extremely small. Thank you, Kyle. They're about the size of a grain of rice. Is this beetle a native of Belize? Did it actually originate in Belize, or did this beetle travel from a different geographical area? What did you learn last week in regards to the mountain pine beetle? Come on, I know you know the information. Put on your thinking cap today. Which particular tree does the mountain pine beetle attack? So we know that it attacks pine trees. What else can we share about the mountain pine beetle? Yes, Erwin?
It takes more than one beetle to bring down a pine tree.
Very good. It takes almost a colony. Okay, it takes a colony to destroy an entire tree. Thank you, Edwin. Okay, this mountain pine beetle, it is a native of North America. So you can see that this beetle travels extremely far until it reached the mountain pine beetle in our pine forest. It spreads rampantly whenever there is an increase in temperature. So it reproduces, or we can say increases with heat, with dry and hot summers. The mountain pine beetle cannot live in cold, freezing temperatures, and that is why it likes to live in tropical rainforests where you will have wet days and a lot of sunny tropical days. It becomes susceptible to freezing temperatures. That means it cannot live in freezing temperatures because they're going to die. Now the mountain pine beetle likes certain kind of pine trees. Do you know what kind of pine tree does it like? Yes, Erwin?
The pine beetle prefers old trees which are easier to take down.
Very good. So the mountain pine beetle likes old, or we can describe those pine trees as being aged and stressed. Stressed trees that have probably experienced droughts or forest fires or some effects of hurricane. So old age and stress. We can also describe those pine forest trees as being mature. How long does it take for a pine forest tree to mature? 80 years. So when the mountain pine beetle destroys our pine forest and break down those trees, it will take back a very long time for our nursery, the younger evergreen, to grow as tall as 80 feet. Okay, so these are just some basic facts about the mountain pine beetle. Kyle said it is the size of a grain of rice. We know that it attacks pine trees. They live in colonies, and they attack the bark of the pine trees. That's the first area where they lay their eggs. They're a native of North America. They reproduce in abundance whenever we are experiencing dry and hot summers. They're susceptible to freezing temperatures. They cannot live in the cold. And based on research, I found that the mountain pine beetle lives almost in every continent except on Antarctica. Why do you think they cannot live on Antarctica? Kyle?
Because it's too cold.
It's extremely cold. Okay, so they cannot live there. They like to attack trees that are old, age, stressed, and mature. And the pine forest trees takes 80 years for them to become mature. Okay. Now, kindly take out your extract. Mountain pine beetles affect mountain pine ridge. And after we have read this extract together, written by Micah Rosenberg, we will be discussing a few questions. We will be doing shared reading today. So I will read a particular part of the extract and then we follow along. I will not be calling any names. We just simply read. It says, Mountain pine beetles affect mountain pine ridge by Micah Rosenberg. Belize forest hit by warming struggles to survive. Thursday, May 31, 2007. A charred pine forest is seen in northern Belize, May 29, 2007. The once pristine forest, weakened by drought, was attacked by dark beetles, leaving it vulnerable to forest fires. Mountain pine ridge forest, Belize, a once majestic pine forest in Belize, is struggling to recover from a devastating plague of beetles that scientists say was caused by climate change. Tiny pine beetles destroyed up to 80%, or close to 70,000 acres of the mountain pine ridge forest near Belize's border with Guatemala. When trees stressed by higher or increased temperatures and years of water shortages could not defend themselves. Efforts to replant were set back by a fierce forest fire 2 weeks ago. It wiped out close to 20,000 acres of this natural reserve, which is made up of Caribbean pines and home to small foxes, deers, and birds. For someone like me who has worked and lived in this forest my whole life, there is nothing sadder than this, said Earl Green, a forestry official who saw the beetles from the Dentroctonus family ravage the forest several years ago. Belizean climate change scientist Kenrick Leslie said droughts caused by global warming weaken the trees, leaving them vulnerable to beetle attacks. Now we have a system in place, he told a global warming conference in this small Central America country earlier this week. It can only get worse. Rising global temperatures, which most scientists say are caused by human use of fossil fuels, are held responsible for an array of changing climate patterns, including increased floods and droughts or stronger and more frequent hurricanes. Now, based on the extract, students, what are some of the key messages that were shared? It has based on the article, what was the problem occurring in the mountain pine ridge? Yes, Edwin?
Droughts that weaken the trees.
We had experienced droughts. Thanks, Edwin. Evelyn, would you like to share? What was one of the problems occurring in the mountain pine ridge area?
Shortage of water.
Very good, shortage of water. Daisy, you are very eager to share a response there.
The beetles destroy 80% of the pine.
The mountain pine beetle destroyed up to 80% of the pine forest. Very good. According to Dr. Leslie, there was also another significant factor that resulted in the increase of the mountain pine beetle. What was that factor? Erwin?
Temperatures.
Very good, Erwin. Rising temperature. And research suggests that rising temperature, which is a result of global climate change, is resulting in the infestation of mountain pine beetle on our pine forests. Now, in which district can the mountain area be found? I'm going to repeat that question again. Want you to think. In which district can the mountain pine ridge area be found? Yes, Glendy? In the Cayo district. Very good, Glendy. And in the Cayo district is located west in our country. What impact does droughts and forest fires have on forest ecosystem? When there is a drought in the mountain pine ridge area, what are the results of that drought? Or if it's a forest fire? Kyle, you're saying something there?
It weakens the trees.
It weakens the trees. I'll put fires and droughts. So it leads to weakened trees. I'll put here degradation of the soil, meaning that the soil has lost its rich fertility and content. What happens to fauna, flora and fauna in the event of a fire or a drought? Yes, Edwin?
Animals lose their habitats.
Very good. Animals becomes displaced. Okay, thank you. Now, based on the article, what factors are closely associated with the infestation of the pine forest? And we mentioned it before. What factors are closely associated with the infestation of the pine forest? Yadira? Think about the pine forest, okay? You're not so sure. Irma, would you want to take a try today? I'm going to come back to you, Irma. Yes, Edwin?
Rising of the Earth's temperature.
Rising of the Earth's temperature. This is one. We also spoke about droughts, shortage of water as well. And we spoke about the mountain pine beetle attacking certain kind of pine forest trees that are mature and stressed. Certain conditions must be available for the beetle to attack the pine forest. How can we offer assistance in the process of combating increased beetle attack? What can we do? If we do a survey of our mountain pine forest area and we take captions of pictures and we realize that the beetles are affecting our pine forest, what are some things that we could do? Let's think about at least one. If we know that the mountain pine beetles are attacking this area, this particular part of land, what can we do with those trees to prevent the spread of the epidemic? What can we do with those trees if those trees are under attack by the mountain pine beetle? And we don't want the other pine forests in this area here to be affected. Erwin?
If the trees are already infested, the best thing to do would be to burn down the whole plot.
That is one thing that we can do, one measure. We can burn that particular area and confine it so that the beetle do not spread or fly or crawl to another area and infest those pine forests. Thank you, Erwin. Now, review of climate change impact. We have been studying climate change for a very long time, and we know that climate change will impact the environment and will impact the way we live. We know that climate change has contributed to a variety of different adverse effects. Let's try and recall some of those effects. What will climate change do in our environment? How will it change our environment? I will give you one and then you will share. It will increase temperatures around the world. What else will climate change bring about besides increased temperature?
It will bring along new diseases.
Spread of epidemics, or just say spread of diseases. We spoke about certain countries having a lot of water. What will happen to other regions? Daisy?
Countries will have a lot of water while others will suffer drought.
Very good. Some will have shortage. As Glendy said, droughts. Let us hear from Kyle.
An increase in natural disasters.
Very good, Kyle. We will have increased natural disasters. More thunderstorms, more cyclones and tsunamis, more hurricanes that will be even more violent. Come on, we can list much more. There are some other adverse effects of climate change. What about those people who live along the coast? How will they be affected? And what will they be affected by? We spoke about hurricane just now. Yes, Stephen?
High tides.
High tides, very good. And when we have high tides, what can this contribute to? To low-lying settlements.
Flooding.
Flooding, very good. Come on, at least two more. There are some other adverse effects of climate change. What can happen to our crops if there is an increase in insects that travel around the world? What can happen to some of our crops? And think about invasive species. Kyle?
They will be destroyed.
Very good. Invasive species can destroy our crop production. So we can have a low yield in crop productivity. And we can also become susceptible to invasive species. Okay? Now, thank you very much, though. It says forest ecosystem. Before we go there, forest ecosystem deliver a vast array of products and services. What are some different things that we can get from our forest ecosystem? What are some things that we can get from our forest ecosystem? Kyle?
Oxygen.
Of course, that's the primary one, oxygen. Human needs oxygen for respiration and for breathing, for living purposes. Erwin?
Medicine.
We get medicines from the herbal plants. Thank you, Erwin. Edwin?
Data like from experiments that we do on the trees.
The scientists and so can do, or even the forest rangers, they can conduct experiments on some of our trees. Thank you, Edwin. Daisy?
Furniture.
We get the timber to make different wood products such as furniture, bedding, the bed, the actual boards. Kyle?
Tourism purposes.
Tourism. Many of our international tourists want to see our natural beauty and wonders, and so they travel from very far to come here. So, and we also get game meat. There are many people who live in a rural area that depend very heavily on the forest for their game meat. Now, climate change can create serious adverse effects that it can change all of that. increased frequency, intensity, and duration of heat waves in cities that currently experiencing them. Climate change impact will result in gradual replacement of tropical forests. If we don't try to confine the effects of mountain pine beetle and other invasive species, our tropical forests will actually become depleted after so many years. We will lose our forests, and the way of life for many people in the rural areas will be lost as well. We will also have a significant loss of biodiversity of all the different species that are native to Belize, to our country. Some of them will become extinct. There will be significant changes in water availability for human consumption, agriculture, and energy generation. There will be increased risk of inland flash floods, which can weaken our soil and result in erosion as well. There will be more frequent coastal flooding and increased erosion from storms and sea level rise. We will have glacial retreat in mountainous areas, reduced snow cover and winter tourism, extensive species losses, and reduction of crop productivity, and we mentioned those just a while ago. There will also be death rate, an increase in death rate due to diseases associated with floods and droughts, which will be expected to rise in some regions. There will be increase in intense tropical cyclone activity. Now, I had just read that, I read something there in regards to forest ecosystem. The climate change impact, this is the way how climate change will impact our forests. Forests have been threatened by a variety of destructive agents. Today, the frequency, intensity, and timing of fire events, hurricanes, and droughts, including ice storms and insect outbreaks, are shifting as a result of human activities and global climate change, making forest ecosystem even more vulnerable or prone to damage. Natural threats such as fire, insects, and diseases are integral to forest dynamics. They are very important, but they can also disrupt the flow of goods and services from forests by affecting the growth and survival, water quality and yield, and biodiversity. Some of the effects of wildland fires cross borders. For example, include smoke pollution and its impact on human health and safety, loss of biodiversity, or site degradation at the landscape level, leading to desertification or flooding. In forests, most of the fuel consists of dead material. So once this dead material becomes dry, the risk of fire increases. And I had mentioned before in our previous lessons the different elements we need for a fire to start. What are those three basic elements? There are three basic elements we need for a fire to start. Daisy?
Oxygen.
Oxygen. Erwin? Fuel. Another person, thank you, Erwin. Oxygen, fuel. One more. Would want to help them. Come on, I hear somebody saying it. Yadira? Oxygen, fuel.
Air.
And air. Very good. Now, forest fires and droughts will exacerbate or speed up a reduction. There will be less water for farms, cities, and forests, less water for irrigation purposes due to higher river flows and decreasing soil moisture, less water for city, municipal water sources. We live in municipal areas, affecting industries, businesses, and homeowners. There will also be significant economic impacts from fires, which will include lost timber value, lost recreational expenditures, human health costs. If you live very close to an area that is burning, then you know you have to relocate. There will be air pollution as a result of forest fires and habitat loss, like what Kyle said before. Also, the loss of trees, and this is a very important factor here, students. The loss of trees will result in forest ecosystem becoming more carbon sources rather than carbon sinks. Now, the role of the mountain pine beetle. We have learned that this mountain pine beetle attack our mountain pine forest in a very damaging way. But the mountain pine beetle has more than one purpose. The mountain pine beetle is a species of bark beetle, and I believe Kyle mentioned that earlier in the lesson, native to the forests of western North America, from Mexico to central British Columbia. It has a hard black exoskeleton and measures about 5 millimeters, about the size, the grain of a rice. The mountain pine beetles inhabit ponderosa, lodgepole, Scotch and timber pine trees. Unusual hot, dry summers and mild winters the last few years have led to the unprecedented epidemic, like the spread and the increased growth of the mountain pine beetle. In Belize, the mountain pine ridge, has been greatly affected by the mountain pine beetle. The mountain pine beetle has dual roles. Firstly, the mountain pine beetles aids in ecological succession. Now, have you heard that term before? Ecological succession? Have you heard about it before? Okay. So, ecological succession is the phenomenon or the process by which an ecological community undergoes more or less orderly and predictable changes. What the mountain pine beetle does, student, it destroys the mountain pine forest. It breaks down the old, the stress, the tall mountain pine forest trees, those that are mature, and it breaks it down. When it breaks down those pine forest trees, when they disintegrate back into the soil, they release carbon and they also release nutrients to the soil. Those trees become lost and new trees starts to grow over. And so it is called an ecological succession because yes, the mountain pine beetle is destroying these pine forests. After it breaks down those trees, new trees are grown or start to grow over. The mountain pine beetle helps to break down age stress and deteriorated trees, giving rise to virgin forest growth. The mountain pine beetle is also a food source. So it destroys trees, and we are learning that it's also a food source for some birds, mammals, and other insect species. In particular, woodpeckers have adapted to find and eat bark beetles under the bark. When I did my research, I found out that whenever certain pine forest trees are under attack, you will always find woodpeckers eating from that same tree as well. The impact of climate change has given rise to an epidemic caused by the spread of the MPB. The mountain pine beetle attacks pine forest trees more rampantly, displacing flora and fauna with increased heat waves. Frequency of infestations in a given area of forest appears to range from 20 to 40 years, depending upon how rapidly some trees in the stand grow to large diameter and produce thick phloem, conditions conducive to buildup of beetle populations. So these MPB, the mountain pine beetle, loves trees that are mature and trees that have thick phloem. In addition, trees must be at a latitude and elevation where temperatures are favorable for beetle development. Beetles attack the trees en masse, in large groups. We spoke about them attacking trees in colonies, and they kill them. We can also say whenever the mountain pine beetles are attacking the pine forest, it forms a parasitic relationship. Remember in one of our previous lessons we spoke about the different symbiotic relationships? What can you recall about parasitic relationships? Think about the relation with the mountain pine beetle attacking the pine forest. We say it's a parasitic relationship. What does that mean to us? Yes, Erwin?
It's like when parasites go into a human body, they stay in there and they make their home, and then eventually their home, which is the human body, dies.
Eventually, yes, if the person is not taken care of or get medical assistance.
It's just like with the other trees when I forgot the name. A plant wraps around them, then it eventually kills them.
Epiphytes?
I'm not sure, but
I
I've
know
seen
the
them
ecosites
up.
grow. I didn't hear you? The stranglers,
Yeah.
okay.
It wraps around the tree, then eventually it kills it.
Yes, thank you very much. Kylie wanted to share something about parasitic relationship. Okay, so the mountain pine beetle, whenever it lays its egg by the bark of the tree, and those eggs, the larvae begin to grow after a certain period because it goes through a life cycle, a stage. Eventually, they will take over the entire tree and they kill it. It says the 4 most important factors influencing beetle populations are the structure of the lodgepole pine stands, how tall they are. Their height tells you that they have grown to maturity to some extent. The phloem thickness, the moisture content of the tree, and the tree during beetle development, and climate change. What the beetle does is actually to cut off the moisture, the water, and the nutrients from flowing in the pine forest. And that is why after a particular period, maybe some months or a year or two, the pine forest tree dies because all the moisture has been cut off. Now the stages of the mountain pine beetle. In mid-August, the beetle flies to new host tree. Female bores through the bark to create nuptial chamber, or pitch tubes, or holes or burrows we would say. The pitch tube forms at the point of entry. Frost is visible on bark and on the ground. After mating, the female constructs vertical egg gallery and lay eggs on both sides. Blue stain fungus is introduced into the wound of the tree. In mid-September, eggs hatch and larvae begin to feed outward from the egg gallery. Each larvae moves parallel to its siblings independently. Adult beetles may mate more than once to extend egg laying. The pitch tube is still gooey, or we say sticky. In October, larvae have extended their feeding tunnel away from egg gallery. The feeding tunnel grows in diameter as the larvae grow, and the surface of the pitch tube begins to dry. Mid-November, larvae begin to replace water with glycol to prevent cell rupture when temperatures fall below freezing. Feeding slows and then stops as temperatures drop. And in December through March, no activity. Larvae can withstand temperatures down to minus 39 degrees Celsius. April through June, larvae replace glycol with water and resume feeding. They take over the entire tree from within. Some adult beetles may survive the egg galleries. Most are just shells. Pitch tubes are firming up, moving upward into the tree. July through mid-August, larvae are transformed into adult, which are called colloid. Beetles, by going through the pupae phase. Remember we spoke about metamorphosis from the egg, the larvae to the pupae until it reaches the adult. Pupae do not feed. The caudal adults are reddish brown, then darken to black. They are taught to feed on the blue stain mycelium to gain energy for their flight to the next host tree. The bark is now loose from the wood due to the feeding of the larvae. Blue stain fungi and assorted secondary insect and fungal activity. Pitch tubes are firm to hard. Now here we have a diagram, students. It has there in late July to early September, we have the eggs in brood gallery there. The larvae stage under bark in September to May. Pupae in bark early to July. Young adults emerge from trees mid-July to August. And mature adult, which will be 5 to 7 millimeters in length, July to September. The adult die in galleries after laying eggs as well. I found out that the increase in temperature contribute to an increase in beetle production. So it takes almost a year for their metamorphosis to occur. It's a 1-year cycle. But due to the increase in temperature, beetle production can occur even more, can increase. So you will have more beetles growing as a result of increased heat. Now, signs and symptoms. How would we know if certain pine forest trees are under attack? popcorn-shaped masses of resin called pitch tubes on the trunk where beetle tunneling begins, the areas where the beetle can actually enter the pine forest. Pitch tubes may be brown, pink, or white. Boring dust in bark crevices wherever they attack that pine forest, you would see the actual tree, the trunk itself starting to break down. And so you will have the dust. Evidence of woodpecker, I mentioned that, evidence of woodpecker feeding on the trunk. Patches of bark being removed, the tree itself will just start to break down slowly. And bark flakes lie on the ground or snow below tree. The foliage turning yellowish to reddish throughout the entire tree crown. The leaves will change color. This usually occurs 8 to 10 months after a successful MPB attack. Presence of live MPB as well as galleries under the bark. This is the most certain indicator of infestation. You will also be able to see the blue stain sapwood observed around the tree's circumference. Here we have a pine forest trees, and as you can see, there are crevices being dug into this pine forest tree already due to the worms, the larvae. How do bark beetles kill a tree? It says once a female beetle colonizes a new host tree, she releases pheromones that attract other female and male beetles to the tree, meaning a successful MPB colonization always involves more than one beetle. The sharp mouth parts or the mandible of that insect, of the adult mountain pine beetle, are ideally suited for boring. They attach themselves into the pine forest tree through the bark to make long vertical galleries where the eggs are laid. It is also those mouth parts that carry the blue stain fungus. Their bodies carries it too. Blue stain fungus spores clog up the tree's water conducting vessels or xylem. It prevents the water flow or movement of nutrients within the tree itself. In addition, the larvae cause even more direct feeding damage than the adults. They tunnel horizontal galleries around the tree. These galleries girdle the tree and disrupt the phylum layer. The phylum is important because it transports nutrients throughout the tree. By disrupting both the xylem and the phylum of pine trees, the MPB larvae and their accompanying blue stain fungus make a deadly combination. The girdling of the tree and cutting off nutrient flow in the phylum layer is what causes the tree to die so quickly, within 1 year of colonization in most cases. Okay, now before we do that activity, I want you to turn to bees. Since we have shared so much about the mountain pine beetle, and then we will look at the prevention and control measures. It's on page 45 of your student workbook. Now I'm going to ask you to kindly do this very quickly. You can work with the person next to you, and then we will be sharing the responses. Good time, sir. The first one, it says, well, the instructions, read the following statement carefully, then circle the correct answer. First one, it says, mountain pine beetles are currently found all across countries within warm and hot climates. True, false, don't know. Circle your answer there. Putting out forest fires can help increase the spread of mountain pine beetle. True, false, don't know. Edwin? A single mountain pine beetle can kill a tree. And we just mentioned that, how they operate and how they function. Let's go ahead now, class. Number 1, mountain pine beetle are currently found all across countries with warm, hot climates. What would be your response there, Yadira?
False.
False. We have found out that they cannot survive well in cold, freezing temperatures. Thank you, Yadira. Putting out forest fires can help increase the spread of mountain pine beetle. Be careful when you're answering this one. Putting out forest fires can help increase the spread of the mountain pine beetle. Daisy?
True.
True. Very good. A single mountain pine beetle can kill a tree. Kyle?
False.
False. We learned that they attack in colony. The mountain pine beetle was introduced into Canada from Europe. Think about how mountain pine beetles reach from one geographical area to another. The mountain pine beetle was introduced into Canada from Europe. Just say what will be your response for this one. Erwin?
False, because you said it was a native of North America.
Very good, and that's excellent critical thinking there. Thank you very much. You can rarely tell if the mountain pine beetle has colonized a tree. You can rarely tell. Kyle?
False.
False. What can we say about number 7? Pesticides are the most effective way to kill the mountain pine beetle. If you're not so familiar with this one, we will learn more about it as soon as we touch base with the prevention and the control measures. So we're going to come back to number 7. Number 8. Mountain pine beetle mainly attacks young, healthy pine trees. False. And number 6 there. The mountain pine beetle is an important food source for some bird species. True, we learned that today. Number 9. Mountain pine beetle will have a serious negative effect on Belize's forest if the problem is not addressed. What will be your response to a question like that? Mountain pine beetle will have a serious negative effect on Belize's forest if the problem is not addressed. Erwin?
I strongly agree.
Strongly agree. Very good, Erwin. The mountain pine beetle could have a big effect on you or your family. These are attitudinal responses now. The mountain pine beetle could have a big effect on you or your family. Evelyn?
Neutral.
You're remaining neutral. Would another person want to give a response there? It depends on where you live and what resources you depend on from the forest ecosystem. If you're a person that lives in a rural area and you rely on timber for whatever purposes, it can affect you there. A healthy forest is a forest with no tree-killing insects or diseases. A healthy forest is a forest with no tree-killing insects or diseases. Strongly disagree. Let me hear from Erwin.
I strongly disagree because without the insects and killings, the forest would just be like a wasteland.
And remember, we mentioned that certain insects create a balance in the ecosystem. They serve different purposes. Mountain pine beetle infestation needs to run its course in the forest. Remember, we spoke about the different purposes of the mountain pine beetle. It serves as food sources for different animals. It also helps to break down the mountain pine forest. The statement is saying mountain pine beetle infestation needs to run its course. If the mountain pine beetle are attacking a particular area, do we have to allow the beetles to continue with that attack? Or can we try to control the epidemic? The best thing to do, or the best measure to employ, would be for us to try and confine that area, to try and eradicate the mountain pine beetle from destroying the entire pine forest. Okay, let's move on, students. Now, before we go to the prevention and control, I want to mention something to you. We spoke about the infestation of the mountain pine beetle, but the mountain pine beetle attacks pine forest in 3 stages. You have one that is called the green stage, or the green attack. In the green attack, this is where the eggs are laid by the bark, at the bark of the tree. We also have the second stage, which is called the red attack. The green attack is the first stage. The tree is presently living. Nutrients are flowing within the xylem and the phloem. The tree is healthy, and the tree also has a pigment that is called chlorophyll. This pigment chlorophyll is what actually gives trees its green color. In the red attack, the chlorophyll will begin to change a different color. Okay, students, I was saying that the MPB attack the pine forest trees in 3 stages. We have the green attack. I mentioned that this is where the MPB lays its eggs at the bark of the tree. The red attack, there will be visible presence of red needles on the tree. Water and nutrients will be cut off, and the tree begins to die slowly. In the gray attack, the needles fall off, and the tree turns gray as well. Now, the beetle is difficult to control. It is protected under the bark most of its life, and the tree dies quickly after being colonized. Chemicals in general do not work because they usually end up damaging the tree. There was a question on that quiz that spoke about pesticides and chemicals. So it's recommended chemicals in general do not work. Ground and aerial surveys are used to monitor the MPB populations. In some countries, there is a restriction on the transportation of pine logs with bark attached, especially during the summer beetle flight, because remember, these beetles can travel. They can move and fly from one host to another. This includes firewood. An important method of prevention involves forest management, conducting surveys, doing testing, doing observation of our pine forest trees. In general, mountain pine forest prefers forests that are old and dense. And we know for a fact that the mountain pine forest area in Belize is very old. Managing the forest by creating diversity in age and structure will result in a healthy forest that will be more resilient or stronger and thus less vulnerable to MPB. Certain formulations of carbaryl, 7 and others, permethrin and bifenthrin are registered for the use to prevent attacks on individual trees. These sprays are applied to living green trees in early summer to kill or detect attacking beetles. This preventative spray is generally quite effective through 1 MPB flight 1 year. Remember their life cycle? Logs infested with MPB can be treated in various ways to kill developing beetles before they emerge as adults in the summer. One very effective way to kill larvae developing under the bark is by peeling away the bark, either by hand or mechanically. This exposes the larvae, the eggs, to unfavorable conditions. The larvae will dehydrate, starve, and eventually die. In Belize, efforts are being done. Seeds collected in the Mountain Pine Ridge Forest Reserve are being tested for vigor and used to grow seedlings in a nursery so that they can protect these pine forest trees. The nursery environment protects the seedlings from the southern pine beetles. Community involvement, people coming together in an effort to eradicate the MPB, also generates employment through the forestry department, and it creates an avenue for citizens and communities to protect their natural resources. We spoke about many people relying so dependently on our natural resources that comes directly from the pine forest. If we allow the mountain pine beetles to destroy our pine forest, then our way of life will have to change and people will have to adapt. Now, our final activity will be, we had mentioned a lot of key terms today, such as climate change, the MPB, larvae, infestation, extinction, forest fire, droughts, ecological succession. On a piece of paper, I'm going to give you a piece of paper. Write it to the back of this one for me. Kindly pass it along for me. I want you to use those words that are listed there. and try and create a display. How will those words connect to each other? Try and create a web. How can climate change relate to increase in heat waves? Create a flow chart using arrows and some basic explanation. And then I'm going to ask a few of you to share. If you want to add new words, you can do that as well. No, Edwin, you will write to the back of this paper using those words. Show how some of those words are related to each other based on the lesson we did today. Put your name on the paper. The first thing, put your name. If you want to include your own word, you can do that. I will create my own flow chart on the chart here. Now you have to be creative and create your own. Let us hear from Daisy what you wrote as a part of your flow chart. Come to the front, Daisy. Quickly. Or just stand right there and speak loud.
I have climate change. I have flooding and drought.
Now, how do they connect? What does the climate change? You have to give an explanation.
The climate change, in some parts of countries, sometimes they have, in some countries they have flooding, while in others they suffer droughts.
Very good.
And in droughts we have the MPB, the mountain pine beetles. They prefer dry temperature because they can't live in cold, and they feed on stressed pine and old, and then you have ecological succession with
Very
the MPB.
good, Daisy. Very good. Let us hear from Kyle.
Have climate change also. It can lead to heat waves by when the temperature gets higher, and then that can cause a forest fire.
Very good. Thank you, Kyle. Erwin?
I have climate change first, then that leads to heat waves.
Yes, go ahead.
Leading to more larvae, which leads to more mountain pine beetles and more attacks on pine trees. Then finally extinction of trees and animals.
Very good, Erwin. Yemi, would you want to share your flow chart? You didn't finish it, Yemi? Okay. Let's look at the one I did. I also started off with climate change as a topic, contributing to the increase of mountain pine beetle, which will result in infestation of our pine forest trees. Mountain pine beetle aiding in ecological succession, and they also attack pine trees. Did you enjoy that activity? Thank you very much. I think you did an excellent job today.